The war was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than any battle cry. The skies above Zerth were filled with dark clouds, streaked with smoke from cities that no longer stood. Commander Elias Kane walked slowly through the ruins, his boots crunching over broken metal and scorched stone. Once, this place had been alive, full of color, laughter, and the energy of thousands of beings. Now it was a graveyard. Buildings were reduced to skeletal frames, streets were littered with debris, and the air smelled of ash and burned circuits. Elias had survived the Galactic War, but the victory felt hollow. Amid the rubble, he noticed movement, a small figure huddled against a fallen wall. At first he thought it was a shadow, a trick of the smoke and fire. But as he stepped closer, he realized it was a child. Or at least something like a child. Her body was tiny and frail, her skin shimmering with an alien glow, and her eyes. Her eyes were silver, like molten metal catching the faint light of the dying sun. They were wide, staring, full of confusion and fear, but also something else he couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe. Survival. Elias approached slowly, keeping his hands open, showing he meant no harm. "Hey," he said softly, his voice rough from months of shouting in combat. "It's okay. You're safe now." The girl flinched but did not move. Her gaze stayed on him, scanning him like she was trying to understand if he was friend or enemy. He knelt down to be closer to her height. "I won't hurt you," he whispered. "I promise." The wind carried the faint sound of distant alarms and the crackle of fires still burning, but for a moment, the world narrowed to just him and the child. He could see the thinness of her arms, the dirt that covered her, and the way she shivered despite the heat of the day. Without thinking, he reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar, holding it out. The girl hesitated, then slowly, her hand trembled as she reached for it. Their fingers brushed, and Elias felt a jolt of something foreign, responsibility. Perhaps, or a spark of connection that went deeper than words. "I'm Elias," he said. "What's your name?" The girl tilted her head, silent at first. Then she whispered a sound that Elias didn't understand, a melody of alien tones that felt both fragile and strong. He smiled faintly. Names didn't matter yet. Survival mattered. Over the next few hours, Elias helped her find water from a nearby stream, fashioned a small blanket from his own coat, and kept watch as the night fell. He had fought countless enemies, faced horrors beyond imagining, but nothing had prepared him for the tenderness he felt toward this small, broken creature. Her presence was a reminder of everything the war had destroyed, and everything it could not take. As the twin moons of Zerth rose in the sky, casting a soft glow over the ruins, the girl finally leaned against him, her body trembling. Elias wrapped his arms around her, feeling the weight of exhaustion and emotion crash over him. "We'll get through this," he murmured. "I won't let anything happen to you. I swear." She pressed her face to his chest and whispered a soft sound, almost like a laugh. And in that tiny, defiant sound, Elias felt something shift inside him. He was a soldier trained to fight and kill, to follow orders without question. But here, in the shadow of war, he found a different mission. One that mattered more than any victory. He had found someone who needed him, someone he could protect. And for the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of hope, not for the galaxy. Not for himself, but for the fragile, glowing girl clinging to him in the dark. The ruins were dangerous. The world was uncertain, and enemies still lurked. But Elias knew one thing with certainty: he would not leave her. Not now, not ever. The war might have ended, but his real fight, the fight to protect life, to protect hope, was just beginning. Days passed, and the ruins of Zerth became their reluctant home. Elias had seen death and destruction on a scale most could not imagine, but never had he felt anything like the quiet fear that clung to Lyra, the alien girl he had rescued. She was small, delicate, and uncertain of the world, yet she carried a spark within her that refused to die. Each day, Elias noticed it more, the tiny flashes of curiosity in her eyes, the way she mimicked his movements, the way she tried to speak the words he said, though clumsily. Food was scarce. They scavenged the broken remnants of the city, Elias carefully teaching her which plants were safe, which waters were clean. Lyra learned quickly. Her hands were nimble, her mind sharp, and even in the shadow of death, she laughed a soft, musical sound that Elias had thought he would never hear again. At first, he didn't know what to do with such warmth. Soldiers were trained to survive, not to nurture. But slowly, he realized that caring for her was as vital as any weapon or armor. Every night, they sat together beneath the ruined towers, the twin moons casting pale light over the destroyed streets. Lyra would whisper words in her alien tongue, pointing at the stars or mimicking sounds she had heard in the city. Elias tried to respond, teaching her a few simple human words. "Home," he said one night, tracing a circle in the dirt with his finger. "Safe," she repeated them, her small voice clumsy but determined. "Home, safe." And for a fleeting moment, the world felt a little less broken, but danger was never far away. The war had left scavengers, raiders, and worse others who hunted survivors for sport or profit. Elias made it his mission to remain vigilant. He fashioned traps, kept watch at night, and moved them from ruin to ruin, teaching Lyra how to hide and stay quiet. She obeyed without complaint, trusting him in a way that surprised him. She clung to his words and his lessons as if her life depended on them, because it did. During the quiet hours, Elias sometimes caught himself staring at her, trying to imagine what life had been like for her before the war. Her parents? Her home? He felt a pang of guilt and sorrow that he couldn't name. He had saved her body, but could he save her spirit from the scars of war? He wondered if he could ever give her laughter without fear, warmth without danger. Every day he tried, in little ways, a gentle touch to her hair, a shared morsel of food, a soft word when she cried. One evening, Lyra stumbled across a broken holodevice buried in rubble. She hesitated, then pressed a finger to its faintly glowing screen. Images flickered to life-distant landscapes, alien faces, laughter. She gasped, pointing, and Elias realized she had seen a piece of her world before the war, before everything was destroyed. He knelt beside her, letting her explore, letting her remember and imagine. "You'll see more one day," he whispered. "I promise. I'll take you where it's safe." Over time, trust grew between them, fragile but unbreakable. Lyra began to follow him without hesitation, copying his routines, learning how to survive without complaint. She laughed more now, letting him see her true self, a child who was not just a survivor, but a force of life. Elias found himself talking to her as if she were an equal, sharing stories of his own life, of Earth and the stars, of battles he had fought and people he had lost. She listened with wide eyes, absorbing everything, asking questions he never expected. For the first time since the war had begun, Elias felt a strange kind of peace. The universe was still dangerous, still cruel in ways he could not ignore. But here, in the midst of ruins and ashes, he had found something that made all the pain worthwhile. Lyra was alive, learning, trusting him. And he would protect her, no matter the cost. The war had ended, but a new journey had begun, the journey of survival, of trust, of hope. And for the first time in years, Elias allowed himself to believe that hope could win. The ruins of Zerth were never truly silent. Elias had grown used to the whispers of wind over broken metal, the distant crackle of fires still smoldering, and the occasional groan of collapsing buildings. But one evening, as the twin moons rose high and cast silver light across the desolate city, Elias sensed something more, a presence, moving with intent, careful but dangerous. He tensed, scanning the shadows. He had survived wars, ambushes, and betrayals, but the thought of someone finding Lyra and taking her filled him with a sharp, cold fear he could not ignore. Lyra noticed his sudden stillness. She clutched his arm, her tiny fingers curling around his sleeve. Elias?" she whispered. He bent down, keeping his eyes on the shadows. "Stay close," he said, his voice low and steady. "Don't make a sound. Trust me." She nodded, her silver eyes wide but determined. In that moment, the child he had sworn to protect became a symbol of everything he was fighting for, not just survival, but hope, innocence, life itself. They had only been hiding for a few minutes when the first signs appeared, distant shouts. The glint of armor in the moonlight, the unmistakable hum of energy weapons charging. Marauders, remnants of the war who thrived on chaos, were combing the ruins for survivors. Elias's heart hardened. He had fought enemies before, but never for a single life that mattered so completely. Lyra was his responsibility, and he would not fail. Moving swiftly, he led her through narrow alleys, crouching behind twisted beams and fallen walls. "Listen to me," he whispered. "You will follow my lead. Don't run ahead. Don't look back. We survived together." Lyra obeyed, her small form pressed against his side, silent but alert. She had grown in these few days, not just in trust, but in courage. Even now, her fear did not paralyze her. It sharpened her senses. They reached a collapsed building that Elias had been saving for emergencies. He lifted a broken door, and they slipped inside. Dust filled the air, and the shadows were thick, but it would hide them for a time. Elias pressed his back against the wall, letting out a slow breath. Lyra huddled beside him, trembling, and he placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You're okay," he said softly. "They can't find us here." But the sounds of pursuit grew closer. The marauders were relentless, and Elias realized they could not stay hidden forever. He had to make a choice, fight or run. Every instinct told him to protect Lyra first, to put himself in danger instead of letting her face the threat. Clutching his weapon, he peeked through a hole in the rubble. The marauders were organized, moving with methodical cruelty, scanning every ruin. Elias's mind raced. He needed a plan. Drawing from years of combat experience, he began setting small traps, loose beams, explosive remnants from previous skirmishes, even improvised noisemakers to mislead their enemies. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. Lyra watched quietly, her wide eyes shining not just with fear, but with trust. He caught her gaze and nodded. "We can do this together." Hours passed in tense anticipation. Elias struck with precision, ambushing small groups, guiding Lyra through hidden passages, and avoiding the full force of their attackers. He moved with the skill of a soldier who had survived impossible odds. But the stakes were higher now. One mistake could cost Lyra her life. She followed silently, learning without words, copying his movements. He saw it in her eyes, determination, courage, and a spark of resilience that mirrored his own. By dawn, the marauders had retreated, beaten not by numbers, but by strategy and the fierce protection of one human who refused to let a child fall. Elias leaned against a wall, exhausted, every muscle aching, but he felt a surge of quiet pride. Lyra crawled into his lap, burying her face against his chest. We're safe," she whispered. He stroked her hair gently. "For now," he replied. "And I'll make sure it stays that way, always." In the aftermath, Elias realized something profound. The war had taught him how to fight, but Lyra had taught him why. In the shadows of danger, in the face of relentless threats, he discovered the strength that came not from weapons or armor, but from love, trust, and the bond between two beings determined to survive together. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the ruined city, he knew that protecting her would be his greatest battle, and his greatest victory. After the night of danger, Elias knew that hiding alone was no longer enough. The world was still full of threats, raiders, wild creatures, and the unpredictable scars of war. He looked at Lyra, small but unbroken, and realized he had to teach her not just to survive, but to protect herself. She was quick to learn, her eyes bright with curiosity, absorbing everything he showed her like a sponge. Elias began calling it their training, but it was more than that. It was a way to give her confidence, to make her strong enough to face a universe that had already taken so much from her. Each morning, they practiced silently in the ruins. Elias showed her how to move without making a sound, how to listen for danger, and how to find food and clean water. Lyra's fingers were nimble, her memory sharp, and Elias marveled at her resilience. Even when she fell or made mistakes, she never gave up. "Again," she would say with a determined smile, and Elias realized that determination was as vital as any weapon he carried. The days passed in a rhythm of learning, protecting, and surviving, but in every lesson, a bond grew stronger. Elias also taught her to read subtle signs in the environment. He showed her which plants could heal a wound and which could harm, how to find shelter when storms came, and how to tell if someone or something was approaching before it could see them. Lyra absorbed everything with an intensity that reminded him of why he fought. This child had survived horrors no human or alien should endure, yet she had a spark that refused to die. She began experimenting on her own, learning from mistakes, and occasionally surprising him with ideas he hadn't considered. But it wasn't all survival. Elias knew that hope mattered too. He would tell stories of Earth, of blue skies and green forests, of oceans that stretched farther than the eyes could see. He showed her small wonders in the ruins, a flower growing through cracked stone, a tiny bird singing despite the desolation. Lyra laughed, her musical voice echoing between the broken walls. In those moments, the ruins didn't feel empty. They felt alive. They felt like home. Slowly, Lyra began speaking more human words. Food, safe, go, and eventually even, Elias. Each word was a victory, a step toward connection. She would try to mimic his expressions, tilt her head when confused, and smile when proud. Elias found himself smiling back more than he had in years, his heart softening in ways war had tried to harden. He was no longer just a soldier. He was her guardian, her teacher, and something more, someone who mattered to her. One evening, a storm rolled in, dark clouds blotting out the moons. They found shelter in a half-collapsed building. Rain poured through cracks, drenching the floor. Lyra shivered, and Elias immediately removed his coat, wrapping it around her tiny shoulders. "Warm," he said, holding her close. "Safe, always." She pressed her face into his chest, and for a long moment, they simply listened to the rain together. The storm outside could rage, but inside that fragile space, they were untouchable. In the quiet moments, between danger and training, Elias began to see the galaxy differently. The war had left destruction, fear, and loss, but it had also left life worth protecting. And this child, glowing faintly in the dim light, was proof that hope survived even in the darkest places. He knew that the lessons he gave her were more than survival skills. They were confidence, courage, and belief. He was giving her the tools to face a universe that could be cruel, but also beautiful. By the time the storm passed, Lyra had grown stronger, not just in skill, but in spirit. She moved with careful confidence, her eyes shining with understanding and trust. Elias watched her, pride and love swelling in his chest. The war had taken many things from him, but here, in the heart of ruined Earth, he had found something he had never expected, a purpose beyond combat, a reason to fight every day. And as he looked at Lyra, he silently vowed, no matter what dangers lay ahead, he would teach her, protect her, and never let her face the universe alone. The quiet days of survival were suddenly shattered. Elias and Lyra had grown used to the rhythm of ruins, to the careful movements and whispered lessons. But the universe had not finished testing them. One morning, the faint hum of engines broke the silence, a sound that made Elias's heart tighten. He crouched, listening. A scout ship descended from the sky, landing not far from their hiding place. At first, he thought it might be Ali's other survivors, someone willing to help. But instinct screamed otherwise. The ship's ramp opened, and figures emerged, humans and aliens alike, armed and alert. Elias recognized the signs immediately. These were not friendly forces. These were remnants of factions that had hunted both species during the war, seeking survivors to capture, exploit, or kill. Their leaders' eyes were sharp, calculating, and Elias knew they had come for Lyra. Her rare abilities, her alien lineage, made her a target. The thought of losing her sent a surge of anger and fear through him, stronger than any battle he had fought. He grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her behind a pile of rubble. "Stay quiet," he hissed. "Do exactly what I say. Understand?" She nodded, fear and determination mixing in her glowing eyes. Elias scanned the area, noting escape routes and potential traps. But the attackers were skilled, methodical, and relentless. They had waited long enough, studied the ruins, and now they would take what they wanted. Elias's mind raced, his heart pounding. There was no time for hesitation. When one of the intruders moved too close, Elias acted. He drew his weapon and fired with precision, using the shadows and debris to his advantage. Lyra followed his instructions perfectly, hiding silently, moving when he signaled. Each step was calculated, each breath measured. Yet even with skill on his side, he knew they were outnumbered. The only chance was to create chaos, to turn the hunters into the hunted. Elias led them through narrow alleys, luring them into traps he had improvised from the ruins, falling beams, hidden pits, and unstable walls. Explosions and smoke erupted in perfect timing, giving them moments of escape. Through it all, Lyra remained close, mimicking his movements, learning instinctively how to survive under fire. Despite her size and age, she moved with courage and intelligence, proving the spark of life within her was stronger than the fear around her. But victory did not come without cost. A misstep, a sudden crash of debris, sent a nearby marauder screaming toward them. Elias had to push Lyra aside just in time, taking a wound himself. Pain seared through his side, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. He couldn't let her see weakness. She had already survived too much. If he faltered now, everything would be lost. Finally, after hours of tense evasion and calculated strikes, the marauders began to retreat. Elias leaned heavily against a wall, bleeding, exhausted, but alive. Lyra rushed to his side, wrapping her small arms around him. Elias. Hurt?" she asked, her voice trembling. He forced a weak smile, brushing her hair from her face. "I'm okay," he lied softly. "We're safe. For now." She didn't fully understand, but she trusted him completely. As the adrenaline faded, Elias realized the truth. The galaxy would not remain quiet. More threats would come, more enemies would seek them out. But in this moment, he also recognized something deeper. The fight was no longer about survival alone. It was about love, responsibility, and the bond he had formed with Lyra. He would face any danger, endure any pain, and challenge any enemy to keep her safe. This small alien girl had become his purpose, his reason to fight beyond the war, beyond himself. In the shadow of the ruined city, with the first light of dawn breaking over scorched towers, Elias held Lyra close. He whispered promises he intended to keep. "I'll never let anyone hurt you. I'll protect you no matter what. You are mine to guard, and I will never fail." Lyra nestled against him, silent but understanding, as if she already knew. And in that fragile, tense moment, Elias understood that protection was more than skill or strength. It was a choice, a devotion, and a courage that could rival any weapon. The universe had tested them. The next trials would come. But Elias Kane, human soldier and now guardian, would meet them all. Together. The city was quiet again, but Elias knew it was only temporary. The marauders had retreated, but their presence left a lingering tension that even the twin moons could not soothe. His body ached from the fight, a deep burn of fatigue running through his muscles, and a sharp wound throbbed in his side. Yet when he looked at Lyra, alive and alert, his pain felt secondary. She was safe, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a breath of relief that Lyra stayed close, her small hand gripping his as they moved cautiously through the rubble-strewn streets. "Elias, what happens now?" she asked, her alien accent soft, almost fragile. Elias looked down at her, seeing the mixture of fear and trust in her glowing eyes. "Now," he said gently, "we move. We find a place where no one can hurt us. A place to be safe, just us." The words felt heavy with promise, but also with the weight of responsibility. Protecting her was no longer optional, it was his purpose. He guided her through narrow alleys and collapsed tunnels, using paths only he could remember from earlier scouting. Every shadow, every creaking building, every flicker of movement kept him alert. Yet Lyra mirrored his focus, stepping carefully, learning the rhythm of danger. Elias noticed how her confidence had grown since the first day he found her. She still hesitated, still feared, but now she acted with intelligence and courage. In those small steps, he saw the hope of a future, and it strengthened him. By midday, they reached the outskirts of the city, where the ruins gave way to barren plains. Elias paused, scanning the horizon. A few clouds drifted over the alien sun, but there was no sign of pursuers. He knelt, pressing a hand to Lyra's shoulder. "Almost there. We'll rest soon," he said. She nodded, her trust unspoken but absolute. He allowed himself a rare smile. For the first time in a long while, he felt something like peace. They found shelter in an abandoned observation tower, its walls cracked but strong. Elias cleaned his wound as best he could, using remnants of the battlefield for bandages, while Lyra brought him water in a careful, almost ceremonial way. Watching her, he realized how much she had grown not just in skill, but in empathy and responsibility. She cared for him as much as he cared for her. A small smile tugged at his lips. In a world scarred by war, they were learning to care for each other, and that connection felt stronger than any weapon he had ever carried. As night fell, the stars shimmered above them. Lyra sat beside Elias, her small body pressed close for warmth. "You always protect me?" she asked quietly. He nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her glowing face. "Always. No matter what." Her silver eyes glistened, and for a moment, he could see the weight of her past, the fear she had carried since the war, melt away. In its place, there was trust, love, and a fragile sense of security. They spoke little that night, but the silence was comforting, not lonely. Elias reflected on the journey so far, how a soldier hardened by battles had become more than a fighter. He was a teacher, a guardian, a protector of life itself. Lyra's presence reminded him that even in a universe scarred by war, small acts of care and courage could create something beautiful. They had survived not by luck, but by relying on each other, by trusting each other, by refusing to give in to despair. When Elias finally drifted into a light, exhausted sleep, Lyra curled against him, her soft breaths steadying his own. The future remained uncertain. Dangers would return, challenges would rise, and the galaxy was not forgiving. But in that tower, among the ruins, a human soldier and an alien girl had discovered something stronger than fear: connection, hope, and the unbreakable bond between protector and child. And that bond would guide them, no matter what came next. Weeks passed since their escape from the marauders, and Elias and Lyra finally reached a world untouched by war. The planet was alive with color emerald forests stretched as far as the eye could see. Rivers sparkled under twin suns, and creatures of all shapes moved freely through the grasslands. Lyra gasped, her silver eyes wide and glowing with wonder. She ran forward, her small feet barely touching the ground, laughing in a way that made Elias's chest tighten with joy. For the first time, he felt that the universe could be more than destruction and loss. It could be beauty. Elias followed, careful but smiling, as Lyra chased a group of gentle creatures across a meadow. Her laughter echoed through the air, pure and unrestrained. He watched her play, marveling at how far she had come from a scared, trembling child in the ruins of Zerth to this vibrant, living force of hope. She stopped and turned to him, holding out a small flower she had picked. "For you," she said simply. Elias knelt and took the delicate bloom, letting it rest in his hands. He looked at her, feeling the weight of everything they had endured together, and whispered, "You are my reason, Lyra, my reason to keep going." They made camp by a calm river that reflected the skies like a mirror. Elias showed her how to build a small shelter, how to fish in the shallow waters, and how to gather fruit safely. Lyra learned quickly, but Elias noticed something remarkable. She smiled more, laughed more, and even shared stories of her past in broken human words. She spoke of the stars she had loved as a child, the games she had played before the war, and the hope she still carried despite everything she had lost. Elias listened, his heart swelling with pride and sorrow all at once. One night, as the twin moons rose over the river, Lyra crawled into Elias's lap, her small arms wrapped around his neck. "Elias, stay with me," she whispered. He hugged her tightly, feeling her pulse against his chest. "Always," he promised. "No one can take you from me. Not ever." She nestled closer, and for a moment, the universe felt peaceful, as if every hardship they had endured had led them to this quiet, perfect night. Elias looked out at the horizon, thinking of the war, the ruins, and the dangers they had faced. He realized that his strength had not come from weapons or training alone. It had come from something deeper: love, compassion, and the determination to protect life against all odds. Lyra had taught him that courage could exist in even the smallest, most vulnerable beings. And he had taught her that even in the face of despair, one could fight for hope, for trust, and for a new life. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them grew stronger. Lyra explored the forests, climbed trees, and ran across fields, always returning to Elias's side when danger or uncertainty arose. Together they built a home, not just of wood and stone, but of trust, laughter, and love. He no longer saw her as just a child he needed to protect. She was a companion, a partner in life, a reminder that even in a universe full of darkness, light could exist. One evening, Elias watched Lyra run to a hilltop, silhouetted against the setting suns. She turned, smiling at him, glowing with life and energy, and waved. He raised his hand in return, heart full. "We survived," he said quietly to himself, a soft smile spreading across his face. "We made it, together." And in that moment, he understood the true meaning of the word hero, not someone who fights for victory or glory, but someone who protects, teaches, and loves against all odds. The galaxy was still vast, and dangers would always exist somewhere out there. But Elias Kane, human soldier and guardian, had found a purpose greater than any battle, and Lyra had found a life beyond fear. Side by side, they faced the future, not as survivors, but as a family. And for the first time in years, Elias felt a certainty he had never known. The universe could be kind, and together, they could meet it with courage, hope, and love. The war was over. Their journey had only just begun.